Welcome to Biohacking the Body, Light and Sound Therapy Podcast with Dr. Jeffrey Tucker.
Dr. Jeffrey Tucker has been blending hands-on therapy, chiropractic care, nutrition advice, and new technology with old methods of health for over 40 years. He maintains an active practice in West Los Angeles, California.
Dr. Tucker's guest today is Jeff Rona. Jeff is an accomplished and award-winning contemporary composer for film, TV, and video games, as well as a recording artist and producer. Jeff is a sought-out speaker on the effect that music has on health and wellness.
I am really looking forward to this conversation because you and I have had many together that include a dialogue of different therapies, of sound, and you are an absolute expert in music, and I want to hear a little bit about that.
All right, well, here I am in your office again. Annie was completely confounded because, I wasn't on the schedule. Excuse me, Jeff. It's good to see you, but you're not on the schedule. Do not ask me to validate your parking.
That's great.
This podcast is covered by insurance, isn't it?
This is great. Can we talk a little bit about, I have to ask you, can we talk how we met? Can we?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's not the most scintillating story, but yeah.
I think it's really interesting. Jeff, you are an absolute expert in the music industry, and you have a very skilled knowledge set that I only learned about as you and I have become friends. And I wanted to share that with our listeners, the concepts that I'm trying to integrate in my practice of sound therapy and vibration and resonance. And you have had really great definitions and experience in this world.
Well, I'll do what I can. Experts that's a tough word. But yeah, I've been involved in making music for, the better part of 30 years. And, my job is to elicit emotions. And when you think about a connection between mind and body, which is where you and I have this connection, is what, if any, role does sound or music play in overall wellness? I mean, I'm certainly familiar with the idea that we crave music, that we rely on music as sort of the cliche is, the soundtrack of your life. But I create soundtracks that tell stories that elicit emotions. So part of the emotion is from the characters and the plots, which we as audiences link to. We always look at how we relate to the characters on a screen, right? Music completes that. You rarely, if ever, see a story being told on screen without music. Why is that? I mean, even documentaries, which are supposed to be depictions of reality, depict reality with music. So, expert, I'm good at what I do, I think, most of the time. But how it's been able to connect to this bigger picture of the mind and body is something that I've explored more with you than I ever had before.
I think I'm particularly coming from it from the health care point of view and enhancing somebody's health, even on a cellular level. And you said there's such an emotion to music. And there's probably some history to this that you and I have talked about. It could be in the drum beat, or it could be in some other means of hearing a sound. So share some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah. What's interesting about our relationship to music in general is that it's a relationship. I don't believe that there's anything intrinsic in a particular sound or musical style or genre that immediately means this heals and this doesn't. That it's a cut and dry thing. Now, there are people who do. There are people in therapy who believe very much in not magical, in tones and resonances and overtones and frequencies that are intrinsically healing. I've never been convinced of that, and I've read up on it as much as I can, and but I believe that there's actually something much more powerful than that, which is that each of us within us knows what music and sound can do to heal us, because it's not just physical, it's cultural. And I think you and I talked about this just within the last few days. Each of us responds to music based on how we are related to that type of music. So I grew up on pop music or classical music or jazz, and that music is automatically going to have a deeper connection, a shorter distance from ear to heart. You know, bypassing the intellect and going directly to the emotional and the visceral. And I think we can kind of clarify or just sort of get out of the way that what makes us feel something embodies some kind of a healing property, you know? And we seek these out. We seek these experiences out. It's all about experiences that create a visceral response. And music is probably the most universal of those experiences. There are no cultures on the planet without music. There are cultures without other forms of culture, but music is the only universal.
I remember hearing that the music that we listened to when we were in high school or junior high school is really our heart music. That's what we continue to listen to the most as we grow older. And I know for myself, it does make me feel really good. And I particularly love hearing those songs or seeing those musicians perform over and over again. But there's also this movement in healing and being able to take a person from one state of their health to a higher level, at looking at vibrational sounds and even what we hear in the mother's womb, right? Which has a sound all of its own, right? That the baby is listening, is hearing in the womb. And in certain cultures, it could be very high-pitched sounds. You know, maybe an Oriental household might sound very different than a more subdued, household. So culturally, there is something there. And that those sounds could have healing properties for the body.
You know, it's interesting. Certainly, there is ample evidence that a great amount of music, going back to the beginning of time, but currently, in some direct way, links to the pace of a heartbeat at rest. Boom, 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 boom. It's the basis of flamenco music. It's the basis of a lot of African music. It's the basis of a lot of electronic dance music. We dance at a tempo that tends to match the experience of the heartbeat, which we can hear in the womb and which we can hear, lying in bed at night. So yeah, I'm in on that.
So how do our listeners grasp that and use this to help them go from one level of health to a higher level? And you and I have had great conversations about it.
I'm a firm believer that it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. I really, really am.
I agree.
Now, you brought up an interesting thing about that the music of our lives is sort of the music that we experienced as teenagers. And to that, I would add commercials and Saturday morning cartoons, cereal and hot dogs and, Pop-Tarts and all that stuff. We remember those jingles. Actually, a neurologist once found out that there was like a massive section of the brain that only stores memories of jingles.
I can do the entire Scooby-Dooby theme song Speed Racer. I can't remember what I had for breakfast.
Yeah.
But I can remember that bit of information, the Band-Aid theme song, the
Sure.
Alka-Seltzer,
Oscar Mayer, all of it.
all of it, and it makes my wife crazy because I can't remember anything that she wants me to do, but I got all that. So
Okay, I'll vouch for you.
you will.
Yeah, there's
Okay,
certain
thank
things, right? We remember holiday songs. We remember
Yeah.
that moving, moment of sitting around a campfire and singing a song. I mean, these are things that really do touch our heart. And is this part of the new music therapy? We look at Norman Cousins, who brought us, laughter. When you're sitting in a hospital room and you're trying to recuperate, that watching, Abbott and Costello and the Three Stooges and other things that, shows that make us laugh is very therapeutic. And I think what you and I are searching for is, what is the music? What is the sound? Is it a non-sound and just a frequency? What we, in my side of the table, is micro frequencies, that resonance, that I've studied this, and I know that, for example, 40 hertz, if a person has pads on their body or something that I can put these frequencies through their body, that particular frequency will help reduce inflammation.
Right. Well, let's unpack all of this, because you just said a bunch of different things.
Thanks.
I'm going to back up just a second, because you talked about something really critical, which is why is music emotional? And you brought up something fascinating, which is nostalgia. When you remember the music of your youth, the music that you loved when you were younger, you're linking directly to what you felt, the feeling of being a child, of being young, of being carefree, of not having responsibilities, not having obligations. That music is drilling into your brain and releasing the dopamines and doing what music does, because it was what you enjoyed as a child. To transpose that and go way deeper, there's something that here in the West we take a little more for granted than in other cultures, which is ritual. And the idea that hearing a sound or a piece of music once doesn't have the same effect on us physiologically, emotionally, culturally, intellectually, as the repetition of it. We're awash in music in the internet age. We have access to everything. And on average, we listen to most music once or twice. Actually, I believe that on Spotify and Apple Music, each piece of most people listen to a piece of music less than once. They listen to a bit, and then at some point they skip. So none of it has this ability to be repetitive in our lives. What is the magic of ritual and tradition? The magic is that when you do it again and again and again, every time you're taking it down another layer in your psyche and in your being, in the true you. It soaks into the bottom level. You go to tribal cultures in Africa or Asia. There are core pieces of music which fundamentally you hear for your entire life, from birth to death. Hundreds or thousands of times that one piece of music comes back and back. You hear a song and you're waiting for that chorus, you're waiting for that hook. You go to the symphony and you go, oh, here it comes the big part in the Beethoven. And it's kind of the anticipation and then getting what you were hoping for. That is an incredible thing. It's why people walk out of concerts feeling joy and feeling that this was an important and meaningful experience. It wasn't the music by itself, and it wasn't even the artists by themselves. You see these, for lack of a better term, legacy acts, bands that you've heard this song, quote unquote, a million times, right? Well, why do you want to hear it again? Because that rush of anticipation, oh, here comes that line I like, that lyric, here comes that chorus that I like, here comes that high note that I love every time. It gives me it gives me goosebumps. And we should talk about goosebumps at some point, because that's a physiological response to music and other kinds of temporal experiences.
It's interesting because those experiences do take me out of myself in a way, but yet so much of what's happening today is bringing the body into that parasympathetic state, bringing us down.
Yeah.
And we already talked about the heartbeat and the breath.
Yeah. Well, we haven't talked about breath yet.
We haven't really talked about breath, but those are two sounds that are primal, right, to us. And that the coaching that I do with many, many patients is getting them to center themselves, right, go to that heart space, soften their belly, and pay attention to their breath. In core training, literally, with athletes or those that are in chronic pain or those that have difficult and pain to heal, unresolving pain, I have to have them take a look at their breath and breathing. And that's going all the way back, like on one part of the scale. And then you mentioned, going to a high energy concert and hearing, our favorite musician, our favorite band, and what that does to us. There's such a scale here.
It's an amazing scale. And, I guess one question is exciting music going to make your heart rate go up, and then quiet music going to make your heart rate go down? You would intuitively, you'd say, well, of course. And yet that's not true. People who love heavy metal music and who listen to good headbangy metal, their heart and respiration rates actually go down because they're happy. They're enjoying it. And with the feeling of joy, because music that you love is going into your ears and is causing a physiological response of happiness, is releasing those chemicals that will bring the body down. Now, that's for some people. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. I don't think there's a God frequency. I don't think there's a God note. I really don't. I think, and I'll go a little deeper why. Because we're getting into the topic, the idea of waves and vibrations and the body. And we've talked about this a fair amount, we understand that the body has tones and resonances. They don't have tones, they don't have resonances, but objects of different sizes vibrate at specific frequencies. If you tap a glass, it plays a note. Tap another glass, it plays another note, right? If you sing that note next to the glass will start to vibrate. If you go to a piano and you push down the pedal so that all the dampers come off, so the strings are free to vibrate freely, and you sing into the piano will sing back to you. The exact notes that you sing, the piano will respond, called sympathetic vibration. Something that vibrates at a given frequency will start to vibrate when that frequency is directed at it through sound. Sound is frequency. Sound is waves, but not all waves are sound. Your therapy deals with waves that are outside of human hearing. And to be clear, sound is air pressure. The molecules in the air are static at a particular pressure depending on how high above sea level you are. As I'm talking, my vocal cords are starting to vibrate. It's sending air out of my mouth, and it's compressing the air, and once the air is compressed, it bounces back almost instantaneously. So I'm talking to you at probably 200 or 300 cycles per second on average. In my voice, maybe a little higher. But as I'm talking, I'm compressing the air up and down at a rapid and relatively stable way. That's going into your eardrum, which has a little membrane inside, which goes to nerves that feed your brain through a fascinating mechanism. And that sound, our ears are capable of hearing very quiet and very loud. So we have a range of amplitude that we can hear. Too quiet, we can't hear it. Too loud, and it causes pain, physical pain. We can hear frequencies between a particular range. We can hear starting down in the just a bit below 100, and then below that it's not really sound anymore. It's turning into vibration. You know, a good quality speaker goes down to about 40 or 20 cycles per second, and below that, nothing's really much happening. And, you know, when we're young, our hearing can go up to about 20,000 cycles per second, a little higher for women than men. And then you lose the high end as you get older. And so that's sound. There are other kinds of waves and other kinds of frequencies which aren't sound. So, for example, we don't hear magnetism. And yet your equipment in your practice, you're injecting frequencies within some inside and some outside of the range of hearing, but they're not producing sound. They're producing waves. So when we talk about a radio wave passing through, or an electromagnetic wave, that's something different than the sound that gets into us through our ears. And I think that fundamentally, physiologically, we're talking maybe about two distinctly different things that maybe shouldn't be automatically, you know, jumbled together. Mm-hmm. You know, about 5-6 years ago, I had a little accident on a Vespa, and I broke 2 bones in my ankle. And I think that was about the time I met you, actually. I think that's why I met you, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
So those first couple of weeks were enormously painful, and you know, I didn't want to be popping Vicodin and Percocet for, you know, weeks. And you know, when you leave, they give you like, you know, a lifetime supply. They don't even ask. They just go, you know, how big is your purse? You know, dump it in.
Pharmacy keeps calling you every other day. Can we enroll you on a 30-day program, right?
But I didn't want to do that, and yet it was so painful for the first couple of weeks, I couldn't really sleep. And I was messed up. And what I did was I put on headphones and I started listening to the most gentle, relaxing, you know, new age style music. And it got me through that time. Without question, I consider it part of my healing. Without question, it was part of my healing because it relaxed me. It's music without a beat. It's music without any freneticism. It's the lowest level of energy of music. And, you know, music has dissonance and lack of dissonance. Call it consonance. And within dissonance and consonance, you know, the way two frequencies interact mentally is a big deal. So all of that music kind of resonates in the more positive, you know, major keys. Minor keys are different, and I think they create a different sense. You know, let's go one level deeper with sound. Sounds are made up of vibrations and harmonics. All sound, all natural sound has harmonics. Harmonics are tones that we don't hear as individual tones, but if I tap a glass and that glass plays 400 hertz, we're actually hearing dozens of additional frequencies, and those harmonics are what give a piano a different sound than an oboe, which is a different sound from a car engine, which is a different sound from a drum, which is a different sound from a baby, which is a different sound from the wind. These overtones are fundamental, and they're physical, they're physics, and they're based on a very simple ratio. The first harmonic is twice the frequency of the note. They're called the first harmonic. So if the note is 100 hertz, the first harmonic is 200. The next one is double, 400. The next one is double, 800. And on and on and on until you can't hear anymore. And the more harmonics, the brighter. And the fewer harmonics, the more round, or we'd call it warm, gentle. And that's the physical world of sound. It's frequencies and the natural harmonics of those frequencies. What's interesting is within the natural series of harmonics, has a major scale inside of it. It has the major third. So it's interesting that we ascribe minor scales and music written in minor keys to being somehow sadder than music in major keys. So is it possible that nature has provided us with a reaction to sound, which is to say that natural sound is happiness or positivity or a lack of sadness, if you can have a lack of an emotion, I guess you can. Or, by bending one note of those harmonics, bending one note has completely altered the way music is perceived emotionally. So I find that, by the way, in my mind, the answer is absolutely yes. If I'm writing music for film, major keys and minor keys will absolutely play a role in the fundamental telling of that story. Darth Vader is a minor key. Luke Skywalker is a major key.
Yes.
I mean, literally.
But the question I have is, in that instance, you have picture and sound working together to create that emotion. So you're getting a boost from the images that are on
Absolutely.
the screen. In Jeff's healing, you're getting another sensory aid, maybe the vibration from a device, like a hypervolt device uses vibration therapy on the body part. And that goes along with, let's say, a vibration from some musical input. So he's getting sensory information, but it's not, it's something that's much more subtle than something that's an image, a visual image that you're getting that's creating emotion along with the music. So when you're doing something like a film or television show, and I was telling you before we started, that's my industry as well, you have this added advantage of being invested in a character, being invested in a storyline, and then you add the music on and that just heightens it. For Jeff, he's starting with something that's much more hard to quantify, like your injury on your ankle, and then adding something on top of it like musical vibration on top of an already existing tool that he's using. That I'm curious, that two connections,
Yeah.
how do you see that? Can you see the connective tissue between those two tissues?
That's a really interesting question.
I try to ask interesting questions.
Okay, well, I guess I better start giving more interesting answers. Again, I think it's valuable to split it out a little bit because again, you deal in a wide range of therapies. So you have something percussive like the hypervolt, which is a massager. I believe that is providing a benefit mechanically. That is, it is stretching your muscles very, very rapidly. I don't think, while it has a speed setting and the speed is frequency, it's I don't look at that as the specific tone of that is what's causing you to gain benefit. There's no question you gain benefit, but I believe it's something much more physical, mechanical. You have electromagnetic devices that you use a lot. You have your shockwave device, which we use. You have these paddles, which are sending electromagnetic energy through your body.
Yep. In radio frequency, and
right,
ultrasound,
and those, yeah, right. So many things. Now they all share that they have waves. Yes. You're 100% right. That each one of them is periodic. It's doing something at a particular rate that is steady and controllable. It's variable. So on the low end, you have something percussive, and that's causing your muscles to gain some therapy. You have ultrasound, which is far beyond human hearing, but is it still doing benefit? I'm sure it is. Yes. And it's like you say, it's at a cellular level.
Correct. It's when he treats dogs, though, then he absolutely can treat them with that ultrasound.
Yes.
Well, and the nice thing about animals is you can see if they're improving or not.
That's
you can
correct.
actually watch their gait or their movement.
Right.
And
Of course, you took something completely joke and made it into something serious.
no, I think that this is such a fascinating topic that I want people to understand that there is cell-to-cell communication, and that we're influencing that with these modalities that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And
Well, can I tell you? I think there's one important element that I think, in many ways, defines the quality of all of this, and that's feedback. How does this make you feel?
Absolutely.
So ultrasound, we don't experience it as sound. It's ultra.
Right.
It's something
Beyond.
It's beyond sound.
Yeah.
And within that, ultrasound is causing cells to vibrate, it's causing body parts to vibrate, and that's going to have a physiological effect.
Yes, it sends signals out and messengers out to
It's
make
no longer
changes.
emotional. We're not dealing in the realm of cultural experiential sound. Now we're dealing in vibration. So honestly, I don't know how you can really go beyond, what do you think? How does this make you feel? Is it strong enough? Is it high enough? Those are the variables: frequency, amplitude.
That's right.
Which is the same as
Tolerance.
sound. And some things going to work and some things not. Whenever you work with me, I have a role to play. It's not a passive thing. It's not the doctor is active and the patient is receiving care. That isn't how you work.
We get to co-create using
Yes, you
these
bring up a
modalities.
possibility based on your experience. You say, I think this might help. These paddles, these electromagnetic paddles, I forget the name of the device, doesn't matter, creates a kind of a warmth. And for me, I wasn't thinking that, although they are vibrating electromagnetic frequencies, I felt the experience of warmth. And you put the paddles in different parts of my leg, and because we were doing a lot of therapy on my knee the last year or so, and I say, yeah, that feels good. You've actually at times said, well, if it hurts, it's working. We've had this conversation about therapies that can be a little painful, like electroshock, shockwave therapy. That pain is an integral part of the feedback. You said it. The guy who I did my platelet-rich, my
PRP.
therapy,
Those are injections.
said the same thing. Yeah, I had a torn meniscus, and they took my red blood cells, ultra concentrated them, and injected them under my kneecap several times, and it was incredibly effective. But as I finished my last round of PRP, he said, "Look, you're not done. You need to continue on," and that's where you and I started on a whole range of therapies. And you're right. They are all to do with waves.
Right. They're enhancers to have the body continue a natural healing process. So you brought up something interesting, Jeff, and it is about music and medicine, or sound and medicine. And then there's sound and the visual experience, and there's sound and smell experience. And all of these things seem to heighten things within our nervous system in the brain area. And have you noticed over the years that there's a more particular visceral reaction to smell and sound, one or the other, both combined?
Right.
And, we all are familiar with laser light shows and music, things like that really do move us.
Yeah. Life is a sensory experience. Yes. Period. We may be souls inside of bodies, but here in this lifetime, we are experiencing life through our senses. And each one of those is pretty important. I mean, some of us don't have all of the faculties that others have. And there are, more than just those 5 basics. There's intuition, there's danger, the risk. I mean, there are other more subtle senses, but in terms of physical, the body sends messages into us that cause us to experience life. When you think about how much of life comes through our eyes, which are just light receptors, right? Just light receptors. That's all they are. So, and yet we ascribe reality to the sensors in our eyes.
Yeah, direct connection to the brain.
Short. I mean, sound is also an incredibly short
Yes.
distance. And I would say that we tend to process sight far more intellectually than we do sound. What we see is the basis of what we consider reality for those of us who are sighted. And then sound tends to enhance that in a less intellectual way, more emotional.
What would you comment about smell?
Oh, well, it gets back to the thing you said earlier. It's about nostalgia,
The most primal part of our brain.
We all know the secret of all real estate transactions, which is to bake cookies before an open house.
That's right.
It was suspended during COVID, but now it's back, and they know the secret. Home, the sense of home. And what is home? Safety, parents, siblings growing up, a trouble-free or a happier time in our lives.
Yeah, nurture.
Nurturing comes from a smell. There's no question that we disregard smell. And taste is exactly, I think, the same. We have memories. Our senses create memories, and our memories create emotions. And those emotions come back to us through the sensory experiences that we tie back to earlier experiences in our lives, both positive and negative. We also experience pain and heartbreak and disappointment. And with those are certain sensory things. You get robbed, you get punched in the face. You're going to remember that. What is PTSD? It's a memory. It's a memory that goes with us for some people indefinitely. Early trauma leads to a repetition of that trauma through a sensory experience that reminds us of the original trauma, even though it is in no way related to the actual danger of the event. You don't need to recreate the danger. It's something that makes you feel through sight, sound, smell, taste.
You get re-stimulated, absolutely. And that brings me to a thought. We should talk a little bit about our chocolate experiences, because that is a therapy too, right? There's an emerging field that's quickly emerging in mushrooms.
Yeah.
And a resurgence of microdosing.
Yeah.
And I think this is another opportunity for healing. And you brought up PTSD as one great example, or depression even.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you how I feel about it. When I started learning yoga and meditation, and I studied it pretty thoroughly in my 20s, and there's a word that they would use, and the word, it's a Sanskrit word, it's Maya. And Maya would translate as the illusion that comes to us through our eyes, meaning that what we think we see as reality may or may not be reality. What we consider to be problems may or may not be problems. That we rely on our physical senses too much. We're too intellectual. And in doing so, we are skipping out on a set of experiences that don't come to us through our sensory organs. So Maya is a rigidity. It's something you try to get past in yoga and meditation. You try to experience the world through more than the narrow range of our sight and sound. I think the thing that hallucinogenics do for us is they give us a brief respite from our purely sensory intellectual experience of the world. And that's something that, just like the Saturday morning cartoon theme songs and the music we listened to as children, it's another thing that we can bring with us going forward. I mean, it's one thing to have a nostalgia about an experience that actually happened. What about nostalgia is not the word, but what about a memory of seeing the world not through your senses? And I think that that's the amazing thing, because, the idea of problems, well, what is a problem? Usually what we perceive as problems are actually symptoms. And that the problem is something you don't even see, you're not even aware of. And yet you could solve 100 problems from one actual solution of maybe authenticity, self-expression, a shift in viewpoint. And it could be 1 degree to the left or right. And suddenly those 3 problems go away. Those 20 problems go away. It's something that just comes to us over time. I think, well, it doesn't come to everybody, I don't feel. But I think the therapeutic value of hallucinogens, just like the therapeutic value of going to a sound bath or something that completely takes you out of your normal day-to-day, let's see, what bills came in the mail today. Let's figure out our route to get downtown at rush hour. And so maybe we're going to go through the valley. I mean, these are not problems. If that's your worst problem, my God, you're in great shape. But because we have the lens of responsibilities and money, all of that gets stripped away. And just the notion of stripping away for me and my experience with hallucinogenics has been, the world is far bigger, far more beautiful, far more intricate and interesting than merely what I perceive through my senses, that I was raised to claim is reality.
There's several things that you said and several key words that I find myself sharing and saying over and over again with patients. And one is to be your authentic self, expansion of the mind is really important. Unclench is another, and soften is another word. Because people do come in and they're just so clenched in their bodies and in their mind, and this causes a lack of oxygen to the tissues, a lack of blood flow to the tissues, which brings us back to the sound wave that helps me to expand, and open up blood vessels and release, unclench, tight muscles, and people feel better. And then there's more oxygen and blood flow to the brain, and if they hear music or they have a nice smell associated with that while they're in the office or getting therapy or home therapy. People talk about a warm bath and they put, some essential oils in it, how soothing it is and
Absolutely.
Therapeutic it is for them.
There's this radical thing that I saw once. A friend of mine from Iran went back to Iran, which is a very difficult country for a single woman to travel through. In fact, they're not permitted. So she brought a friend, also Iranian, unrelated, but she claimed he was her brother, otherwise they wouldn't have allowed them to travel together. And he brought a video camera with him. And Iran has these different villages near the borders of very different cultures functioning within one country, but it's leaking from the Middle East and from Turkey and Armenia. So you've heard of the whirling dervishes, these people who get into an ecstatic state. So they went to this huge yurt. I mean, it's massive. And there was, 50, 100 people. And he showed me the video. I don't know that anybody's ever seen this, but it was amazing. So they have these drummers and they have these other musicians, and they're doing this very ritualized music, and people are starting to get into this state, and the music is creating this first level of ecstasy. Then they start twirling, and it engages like a second level of ecstasy, of an ecstatic experience. And then the men are dancing with these swords. And then they start hitting each other with the swords. But not just the flat, they're actually hitting each other with swords, and they're bleeding. The amazing thing, and I asked about this, I said, I mean, this seems barbaric. He said, oh, you don't understand. In the state they're in, they don't feel it. They don't feel pain. It's a release. It is a cathartic experience. And I think that gets reflected in other cultures' rituals of catharsis and ecstasy coming through music and movement. And it just indicates how physiologically powerful an experience of music is. But I think it does have to come, I think part of it is the ritual, part of it is the nostalgia, part of it is repeating something from youth to older age that continues to reconnect again and again. You know, prayers, what is a mantra? It's one experience repeated again and again and again. And only through its repetition does it have power. The mantra's power to focus and calm and center the mind and the body doesn't happen once. It happens after hundreds and thousands of times of repeating that one experience, a mantra is a sound usually. There are visual mantras, mandalas and what have you, but the fundamental mantra is the Om, considered the sound of the universe, which, by the way, going from O to what you're doing is you're taking the most number of harmonics and slowly going to very close to the fewest number of harmonics. So it is yin and yang in the form of one syllable. And that, to me, is stunningly beautiful. Absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, literally mind-boggling when you think about it. So I think I don't know how we can tie all of this together, going from, psychedelics to heavy metal to the harmonic series to vibrations above, below, and beyond sensory awareness. But I think they all tie together. And what I appreciate in your practice is your ability to tie them all together. Some of them are sensory, some of them are not sensory. They are all based on wave patterns. They are all based on frequencies, whether it's magnetic or percussive or ultrasonic. They all seem to be spokes in a wheel of how we as humans experience everything. And you talk about the cellular level, which I don't know much about. I don't know much about that. I only know what has made me feel worse and what has made me feel better, emotionally and physically. And you can't put them into little categories. They really do influence each other. I think what's beautiful about the experience of music or art or great writing is that it puts us in a state to receive other experiences. And those experiences put us in a state to receive yet other experiences. And some people take it a short way, and some people take it a further way. Some cultures are very limited in the number of levels of those experiences, and some get very, very, very deep. If you ever listen to Brazilian music, jazz, samba. Samba is a beautiful music. It has beautiful drumming and a rhythm to it and a heartfelt. Well, samba actually stems from a religious ceremony and a sect that came from Africa during slave trade to Brazil, and they brought this ecstatic religion with them called Candomblé. And Candomblé is an ecstatic religion, not unlike the dervishes, based on drumming. It's perhaps the only matriarchal religion in the West. The women are the priests. The women are the ones who take care of the ceremonies. But it's very ceremonial. It's highly ritualistic. But it is them playing the drums that we're familiar with in Brazilian music, the congas and bongos and surdus and these beautiful Brazilian instruments, and it's the same rhythm that we hear in fairly light music now. In if you ever hear any Brazilian artists, and I've seen some again, there aren't a lot of videos that I'm aware of, but it's another great example in the West of the power of ritual and of sound to create an ecstasy, which they consider to be their form of healing.
It's remarkable, all of the things that you have shared. And I love this conversation, and I know that we're going to have many more.
Let's have more. I enjoy
Yes,
this.
and I think that what you and I are doing is trying to see what fits together to give us this relaxation effect or this healing effect on the body, and how we can be blending, what I know, to help people, get through life with more ease. So, Jeff, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your knowledge and your expertise, and for sharing your information with our whole audience, and really do look forward to having more future conversations. And I think that the individuals that get to listen to this, and if we were to fast forward a couple of years from now, what are your thoughts on this
All
topic?
of it would be wrong.
This has been Biohacking the Body, Light and Sound Therapy Podcast, with your host, Dr. Jeffrey Tucker. I'm your moderator, Barry Snyder. We'll see you next time. The Biohacking the Body podcast is sponsored by Phytazol Topical CBD. Don't let your muscles and joints sideline you. Choose a CBD formula you can trust. Now, you want to enjoy life without limits, and Phytazol understands how frustrating it must be to miss out on the activities you love. Now, everyone deserves to live a full life and do more and go further. It's why Phytazol partnered with pharmacists to develop a patented CBD topical serum that's scientifically proven to penetrate deeply into your skin to deliver more CBD to the areas you need it most. Phytazol, the most powerful topical CBD. Discover the Phytazol difference. You can purchase Phytazol at drjeffreytucker.com/store.